Welcome to this edition of SAM Conversations. In this episode, we are looking at the current state of the bilateral relationship between India and China, which has been very troubled, to say the least. In the aftermath of what is being referred to as the Galwan tragedy, where the Indian Army has lost 20 personnel, many more have been injured. We also understand that there were casualties on the Chinese side with the PLA troops. And it's about a week since that incident. And there have been high level talks between India and China at military level. And today, Tuesday, June 23rd, we understand that over the last few hours, at the conclusion of the talks between the commanders on both sides at the 3-star level, there is an agreement, and I wanted to read this particular phrase very carefully. As per the news reports that are now emerging, it has been indicated that both sides agreed, I quote, through mutual consensus to disengage, unquote. This media report goes on to add that all the friction areas in eastern Ladakh were discussed, and hopefully, I want to underline the word hopefully, the agreement would be honored and there would be some return to the status quo as it prevailed in April. That is the objective, the end result that definitely I'm sure India would like. It had been conveyed more than once through different channels. And to discuss this particular development, the talks that have just concluded, and also the larger context about the relationship between India and China, I'm very happy to welcome and introduce our guest for the chat today. We have Lieutenant General Rameshwar Roy. He is the former Director General of the Assam Rifles. He's also been a Corps Commander, and he has addressed or dealt with this area that we are talking about between India and China along the line of actual control for many years. He's an infantry officer of the Indian Army. And I'll request General Roy to talk to us about the tactical and strategic implications of whatever has happened over the last few months. And allow me also to welcome and introduce Professor Ravi Prasad Narayanan from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is a China watcher of many years. And Ravi, if I may call him that, has been one of our scholars who has spent some time in Taiwan. So he has a very nuanced understanding of what I would call as Chinese strategic culture and the political dynamic as it obtains in terms of how Beijing, particularly under President Xi Jinping, sees itself in terms of quote unquote the rise and aspiration of China. Let me start with you first, General Roy, if I may. If you would be able to explain to our viewers the military side of what has happened over the last few months and the larger strategic implication, because the way I see it, and let me say this in lighter vein, that as a sailor, my understanding is that the way in which China has managed to carry out these so-called incursions over a very wide length, from Ladakh all the way up to Sikkim. The Indian Foreign Ministry used the word premeditated. And there were many reports to suggest that they have fortified themselves in a manner that would make it very difficult in a tactical situation. So there are 2 or 3 questions which I'll come to later. But if you could just talk about the current tactical picture and what are the strategic implications. All yours, General Roy.
Okay, let me start with the ground level first, because that is the tactical level and how it has the strategic implications. At tactical level, we are accusing the Indian Army and the rest of the establishment that maybe we did not have the intelligence about the area, or we have not been able to read through the initial build-up or initial incursions by the Chinese PLA as far as the Galwan Valley, as also the Pengong Tso area is concerned. But let me tell you that whenever these summer months come, it has been a format for quite some time that PLA has been coming and carrying out, conducting exercise maneuvers in these areas, and that we are aware of that they're not only here, but they do it elsewhere also. And after carrying out these maneuvers, they go back. So our initial response was not to match their coming into these areas, because we took it as such that they are probably carrying out one of those summer maneuvers and they would go back. But then we started doubting this particular aspect of summer maneuver, because the kind of preparations and the artillery equipment and mechanized vehicles and all, with the wherewithal that they had come, the kind of equipment they had carried, to us it appeared that this time they have slightly different intentions. As we came to know about this kind of an intention, as we read through this, we also started building up our troops, our strength in these areas, slowly, to say that should something else happen, we should be prepared for it. But then the issue here is that Galwan and Pengong Tso, I'll talk two issues differently, or two areas differently, because in Galwan area, the alignment of LAC, by and large, let us first say that by and large, the alignment of the line of actual control, we all know that there is a differing perception as far as the Indians and Chinese are concerned on the actual alignment of the line of control. Now, in this, the China perceives it more inclined, shifting it towards the west, and we are inclined to interpret it more towards the east. Now, here, the Galwan Valley, we believed that whatever line they had agreed to, because in 62 also they had come to Galwan Valley, and whatever line they had agreed to draw, we took it that that line in LAC, it did not have any variations in their perception, our perception, except for the fact that wherever our PP14, which has been the basically the point of contention, they have been a little away from this PP14 towards their side of
When
the
you say
LAC.
PP, Rameshwar, this is patrolling point
Patrol
14.
point, yes, it is a patrolling point. It's a patrolling point and not a post as such. Not post as such. Patrolling point means there is a little small ad hoc kind of infrastructure where patrols go there. They make this as the patrol point, and then they go a little beyond and see the area that nobody else is, and course there and come back. Or sometimes they go only up to this point and then they come back. But as far as the Pengong Tso area is concerned, there the perceptual difference between the LAC has been rather substantial. There we perceived our line of alignment as finger 8, passing from finger 8. Finger basically are the spurs, which come out through the mountains, as the mountains peter off into the areas, plain areas, or in this case, the lake area. So finger 8, it denotes the last spur as we start counting from the Indian perception of the LAC. This is the last spur right opposite the Sarjap post that they have had until now. Then you keep coming on our side, then finger 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we had an ITBP post between finger 3 and 4, where we had the similar kind of issue like your PP14 there, and you can say that just below finger 4 has been the ITBP post over there, from where they were patrolling areas up to 8, like Indian troops were patrolling up to area finger 8. Now there is a road that they had built over a period of time, particularly when we were involved with the Kargil ops. They had, in that duration when we had thinned out from here, they had made the road. Now strangely, this road was being used by both the sides. We were also following the same road to go to finger 8 during patrolling, and they were also following the same road to come to this side. However, what happened this time was that they came and sat at finger 4. And this meant effectively that they have come from finger 8 to finger 4, a distance of around 7 to 8 kilometers as far as the mountainous spurs are concerned. But if you translate that or draw the line towards Demchok through lake area, then this area would be very substantial. Now, it is not the lines are in isolation. This line will also join 200 kilometers up northeast towards Galwan Valley. And therefore, that is how the complete LAC has to be perceived. Now, in Galwan again, what had happened was that when we tried to carry out the detailed check, we realized that they have had a little incursions towards the ridge line, towards the edge of the valley. And that what is being reported, because we have no official confirmation of all this from the government sources as yet. So it was all from the reports and the satellite imagery and whatever was coming on the media, whatever was being written by various scholars, various people who have read through these satellite imageries, that here the incursions were anything from 1.2 kilometers to around 3.4 to 3.5 kilometers across the LAC towards our side. Now, the tactical connotation here was that first of all, they have tried to align themselves, or they have come up to their perceived line of the LAC. Not a problem so far. If you have come to your perceived line of LAC, we expect you to go back thereafter once you have carried out your patrolling, and because LAC means line of actual control, not necessarily line of actual occupation. If occupation is the word, then it will become like an LC, which is with Pakistan, eyeball to eyeball contact. So line of actual control, the control can be exercised by carrying out your patrolling periodically, that there is no enforcement by anybody, that nobody has made any structures, that you are not based yourself over there. But that is the case this side. They have taken advantage of that situation. This time they came
So basically,
back.
they have not gone back. That is the critical point. That
As
they
of
may
now,
have come, they have not gone back,
they have
and
not
they
gone
decided
back.
to bunker down.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
I'll
my
request
ground
you to
report.
pause on that, Rameshwar. If I
All
could
right.
just request you, just hold on to that thought. So
Okay.
let me summarize this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong later.
Okay.
That
Okay.
what makes this particular incursion different and more complex is one, it's across many points.
Yes.
And secondly, they had come across whatever be the perceived line of actual control and did not go back as was the normal protocol in previous years. So that is
Absolutely.
what makes it very different. Okay, just stop there
Absolutely.
if I may request you to hold on to that thought.
Yes.
Professor Ravi Prasad, if I could bring you in at this stage, and you have been following the bilateral relationship, and over the last few years, we've had a series of these incidents, where the Chinese PLA has come in, including one which was very, very widely noted when President Xi Jinping was in India, in Ahmedabad, when we had the Chumar incident. So most recently, we had Doklam. In between, there was Depsang. So can I request you, Professor Ravi Prasad, to talk about the political and diplomatic context to the way in which China is using the line of actual control to send whether signals or achieve objectives that it has set for itself? Professor?
Yes, thank you. What has happened in Salwan to me is the continuation of what happened in Doklam. The theater is different. There could be other theaters in the future. Now, strategic aspects were discussed by General Roy. What I would see is that let us look at it from the domestic point in China. First, Xi Jinping. He is a personality of sorts where he has seen to it that he is the president for life after tinkering with their constitution, which earlier used to have a president only for 2 terms. So Chiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, they abided by it, but this man has very conveniently tinkered the constitution, so he's there. So like his neighbor, Kim Jong-un. Now, second is Xi Jinping has sidelined most of the powerful, you could say, factions within the Communist Party of China. Earlier, you used to have a very powerful Shanghai faction. They have been sidelined. The Hu Jintao faction, they have been sidelined. Also, the very important intrinsic CCYL, China Communist Youth League, they've all been sidelined. And this man has made himself the next Mao. This has not gone down well within the party, and although the factions have been sidelined, marginalized, with some of them imprisoned, there are murmurs as to why should an individual accumulate so much power? Is the party larger or the personality? So this is an aspect which Xi Jinping is worried about. Very important is a fact third, is that the PLA has not trusted Xi Jinping from day one. They would have trusted Bo Xilai, but Bo Xilai made a mash of his own life, and he's now counting bars. And Xi Jinping was the beneficiary. Xi Jinping does not have any military background, and his parentage, they are the Communist Party, you could say family elite. Xi Jinping, his father, was dissenting from Mao Zedong, and Mao punished him and sent him to Guangdong province, where he, what do you say, made a fishing village called Guangzhou, what we know today as Guangzhou, being the center of electronic industry in China. Now, Xi Jinping, son of Xi Jinping, he came with that political pedigree, but the PLA has not warmed up to him, which is why, very importantly, in Tibet, their chief is a close friend of Xi Jinping. And interestingly, during our negotiations with the Chinese, I think latest was in Moldova, and that is Eastern Chushul. The Chinese side was represented by a major general, but our side was a lieutenant general. I find that as an anachronism, where Vishwa pointed out that lieutenant generals negotiate with lieutenant generals. It is China's way of humbling us, saying that our major general is on par with your lieutenant general or maybe better. Now, coming to this whole fracas that is taking place, the People's Liberation Army, they've always played an important role every time China has gone through its domestic political catharsis. History is our best teacher as we know it. 1956 to 1959 was a great leap forward, which was actually a great leap backward. And it led to millions of people starving to death. And it led to a situation where Marshal Pang Te-huai, he criticized Mao Zedong tongue-in-cheek at a party meet, saying that the party is larger than personalities. And Pang Te-huai was then ejected from the party, but his head still was over his shoulders. Then came Mao saying that he is retreating, and it was Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping who became president and general secretary of the party, while Mao plotted from his retreat how to get back. That was when Dalai Lama crossed over to the Indian side through Arunachal, which the Chinese have been claiming. That was a humiliation to the Chinese. And it was Mao who galvanized the PLA to say that our face is lost because the Chinese face is very important. And we had 1962. It coincided with political problems inside China. Then comes 1967. Mao comes back after his so-called retreat. And the Cultural Revolution is on. That was when there were several fracas with the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union. That was 1967 to 1969, when the Cultural Revolution was at its peak. Then comes 1979, when the reforms were started by Deng Xiaoping, and the PLA thought that they'll be frozen out, and they instigated the conflict with Vietnam, and they ended up with a bloody nose. Sorry to use that word, but that is what happened. And every time China's had a domestic crisis, the PLA has played a role of either fomenting the crisis with an internal audience in mind. That is
so can I request you,
two,
Ravi, to just hold on here for a minute? Would it be right then for me to say that the takeaway and what you are pointing towards is that there is a correlation between the domestic political dynamic within China and the way in which the PLA has displayed its assertiveness, aggressiveness, and perhaps this is one of the elements we need to keep in mind when we look at Galwan and the multiple premeditated incursions by the PLA. Would that be a fair summary?
absolutely, because there's one final point which I have to make in this continuation. The PLA has also played the role of being the guarantors of security to economic aspects. And this particular part, especially Western Ladakh, Geological Survey of India has done a few preliminary, you could say, extracting samples. But these parts of Western Ladakh are rich in rare earths, especially zirconium. Zirconium is also used in nuclear reactors because it is an element which cannot be corroded. And zirconium, it does not easily absorb neutrons. And the Chinese know very well that this area is very rich in rare earths. So make a grab for it when the Indians do not have the infrastructure.
Okay, so
This has to be
I think
made.
this is a good point you brought on board, that apart from strategic geography of the region, there is also an element of the kind of resources. But let me bring in General Roy at this point. General Roy, may I request you now to develop what you were saying earlier, that there is a certain tactical setback as far as India is concerned, and the reason why we are insisting on the status quo ante, that they should go back. And if they don't, what are the strategic implications of the Chinese grab or the Chinese incursion? General Roy, could I request you to come in?
Okay, let me just clarify that small point, Lieutenant
Yeah.
General versus the Major General. It's a, we have not looked at it with so much of fine perception to say that we do not understand their ranks controlling a particular area in terms of, number of troops and command control structure. So we haven't gone looking into that. So long as we know that the talks are on with two military commanders, and the fact of the matter is, whether it's a major general or it's a lieutenant general, nobody in PLA, including our side also, have the final decision-making authority while indulging in the talks on the table right there. They go with the premeditated kind of a grid, and they have to discuss that grid, and then they are told as to what is the leeway between those negotiations, and attack it. If it is going beyond that, they take a break, come consult, and go back again. So therefore, that point is out. The technical part here is that the basically the two very big technical issues which have a bearing on the strategic issues. One is the defining of the LSA itself. And since we have the experience of dealing with Pakistan border, where they have tried to obliterate the old boundary of J&K state with the Pakistan when Pakistan got divided, saying that it is not an international border, and they tried to obliterate it by calling it LC, line of control. With the result, the situation prevails that whatever place you control is all yours. I mean, takers are keepers. In this case, again, the Chinese are calling it line of actual control. So this line of actual control de facto is not a stated permanent line to define a border. And if this line is not defined border, then in that case, our biggest concern is that this line will keep shifting as per who controls line up to which point of time. If we are controlling in our perception line up to finger 8, or Galwan Valley, and these people have breached that line and come this side, be it Galwan Valley or be it Pangong So, then do we accept this new line now? And if we do, then would it end here? No, it will not end here. That is the way Chinese have behaved. They have a strategy of creeping forward the borders. That is our biggest
what
worry.
they call the creeping assertiveness that we have seen in the South China Sea also.
Exactly, everywhere. So the point here is that at this point looks like a very tactical and innocuous kind of a point, that what is there in such desolate land 2-3 kilometers this side or that side. That is not the point. The point is the messaging or the definition for all future times to come, which will, get redefined. The LSE will get redefined if these people don't go back. And to complicate the matters, there was a statement in between which now Chinese are quoting after the all-party meeting by our Prime Minister. The clarification has been given, and we take it that what he said technically or otherwise was pertaining to Galwan Valley alone. But they are trying to stretch it to Pangong So as well. That look, everybody says we have come only in our area. Now the problem is that we would have accepted this if they say, okay, we will ratify it. We'll ratify it in the border talks to say, okay, this is the de facto border hereafter. But that will not happen. This has not happened in any number of 22 odd border talks that we have had so far. That is the point. Now, the strategic fallout of this entire episode is that they wish to dominate the road Dorbuk Shiok DBO, so that whatever we move on it, they will be either able to interdict it or be able to it with the Depsang plains. Then we say that they have come south of Depsang plain in Galwan Valley, as also south of Galwan Valley, because from Galwan Valley to Pegong So, a total distance is approximately 200 kilometers. Now, DBO, why did we activate it? 2008 onwards, we have very been proactive in activating the DBO. 2008, we landed AN-32. 2013, we landed C-130 Hercules, a strategic lift aircraft. And we have a composite brigade group, composite group of all arms, including the Air Force elements at DBO. Because from DBO, as the crow flies, Karakoram is just 8 kilometers, and we carry out patrolling up to Karakoram from DBO. From DBO, we carry out patrolling of the entire Depsang plains. From DBO, we also have a linkage, Nubra Valley and beyond, into Siachen. Now, I feel the way we read this, the strategic fallout of this area is that it is going to impact, firstly, the China's own interest of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is just beyond Karakoram Highway, Karakoram Pass, passing through Khunjera Pass. And we know that thereafter it lands into Gilgit-Baltistan area, where 200 kilometers of China's CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, passes through the area which is occupied by Pakistan, POK. There is a position that we have in Siachen Glacier, where NJ 9842 is the last line up to which survey was done, and the LC ends there. There is contention as to which way should an LC proceed from there on. We say it should follow the watershed. Pakistan says no, it should follow the same alignment, and therefore it will land up at a place called Saksham Valley, which was given to China. It will end at the southeastern edge of Saksham Valley. Therefore, de facto, they will be in league with China. Is it an indication that collusion of China-Pakistan at this point, two-front war, they want to realize it in future times to put more pressure on India? Our position in Siachen gets weakened. See, in strategic terms, while in tactical terms, it is to do with the land, how much you are holding, where you are stationed. But in strategic terms, what is your field of domination from there? What is your area of influence from there? That is going to make a huge difference if our DBO and all these complex north of where they have come or northwest of where they have come feels threatened. And that is a bigger worry, because LAC is not a static line.
I think that's a very, very, lucidly explained point that General Roy, let me commend you. I think the importance of DBO and the access that India currently has, and the fact that we were able to land a heavy transport aircraft, C-130, I think has certain implications about Indian presence, military presence in a composite way, and the kind of signal of Indian resolve. And I want to extend this to Professor Ravi Prasad and request him to comment on this, which is, I'd like to make the following formulation, Ravi, that apart from the strategic geography, which General Roy has just alluded to, and the whole Pakistan factor, the extended point, if I may, is that if you look at the Chinese intent from 1962 to where we are now, 2020, it's almost 58 years. Would it be right to aver that China is seeking the equivalent of a unipolar Asia, where China is the sole hegemon, the solitary pole, and the rest of Asia needs to defer and accept whatever be the Chinese interpretation, whether it's in relation to the line of actual control in relation to India, or whatever is happening with Japan, not just now, Senkaku, but historically from the end of World War II to where we are now. Territoriality has got a certain political connotation. It can also stoke nationalism. But would this formulation be, appropriate to say that China is seeking the equivalent of a unipolar Asia, and whatever it is doing with India is part of this much larger signaling to Asia? Professor Ravi Prasad?
You are very right. It is more than unipolarity. Perhaps it is the only systemic aspect to the world which they wish to present. that they are a success, although they call themselves communists. Now, when it comes to India, as I said earlier, the personality of Xi Jinping is also wedded to the financial architecture China has been creating very assiduously. Till the One Road, One Belt and the new development bank that was set up. People usually talk about the Asian Development Bank based in Tokyo. Nobody talks of the ADB anymore. It's only the bank for the Chinese have set up, which I think till recently was headed by K.V. Kamath, who used to head ICICI. Now, it is an alternative financial architecture that the Chinese are creating, where the World Bank and the IMF are going to be footnotes, citations in journals, articles later. So they are working to a plan where Xi Jinping has also said there is something called a beautiful China, which is said Chungguo Among. Where, well, if this is beautiful China, then I think we better stay away from it. It was a wise decision to stay away from One Road, One Belt, because it was a trap where the African countries are already complaining that the interest rates they're paying are much more than what they used to pay earlier to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So these dollops are now finding, I guess, lesser and lesser countries. So this is where, yes, they are trying their hard, their best to create a totally different world according to how things are scripted in Beijing. But the good thing is that there is a very minimal, you could say, sense of disgruntlement within China, which means within the Communist Party of China. So the only thing we can do is we have to bear this phase and the economic regress that we will face, because we in any way have a huge adverse trade deficit with China. And that will reduce a bit, but not to a large extent, because already corporate enterprises are saying that we should still continue trading with China. Whatever, this is something which has started. It is good that the generals are negotiating at their level, but I would say, I would risk myself for saying this, do not trust the Chinese when they're negotiating, because they already have decided what the outcome should be. So negotiations and shaking hands, etc., one part, camera pictures taken, but the reality is different. So we have to be continuously wary and just see that this is not a diversion when they try to increase their activities, trying to grab Arunachal. Because on maps of China, it shows China to go right up to Upper Assam. So this is something ridiculous. And Arunachal, of course. Now here, sadly, the Kuomintang's map of China and the Communist Party of China's map of China are the same. And the Kuomintang actually have a larger China than what the communists have. So this is something which I guess we can speak to the Taiwan-based Kuomintang. But China at the same time is spreading canards and saying that, hold your breath, that China is a multi-party system where all the parties, it seems there are 5 other political parties, who swear by the leadership of the Communist Party of China. And they call themselves a multi-party system. So that is what we have to understand. Because China is at very different, very, very different levels. How we track that is most important for us.
Thank you. Actually, Ravi, in a way, you preempted, the last sort of issue that I wanted to raise with both of you. But now that you have already put your head in the block, as you said, about the trust factor, General Roy, I'll give you the last word, and you will forgive me if I seek the equivalent of a Twitter response from you. But I started this discussion by saying that today's news is that both sides have agreed to, quote, mutual consensus to disengage. That is the agreement that's been arrived at. So my specific question to you, General Rameshwar Roy, is, can we trust the Chinese on this? And a few weeks from now, will we see that they have disengaged as promised? General Roy?
You see, if we go by, though there are no comparisons to what happened in Doklam and what is happening now over here, and typically we are calling this also a face-off in Eastern Ladakh. Uh, See, they are very smart. The term disengage can mean many things at different times with different people. A soldier's connotation of disengage would simply be this much, that a safe distance both the sides maintain. In disengagement, they are not speaking of going back to the pre-April line. They haven't said that. Or what exactly will be the wording of this disengagement is very important. But more than that, even when they say, or even when the wording satisfy both the sides, they very smartly circumvent the agreements to their advantage. In Doklam, if we look at it today, they are more strong than what they were before. They have been able to make that road not from the same point where we stopped them, but from a different point and come to Jamphai Ridge. Here again, my fear is that they will try to get that particular position and tactical advantage and the gains that they have made until now without fighting by some kind of a wordly agreements, which may or may not translate themselves on the ground in the same way. Therefore, we have to be on the lookout as to which could be the areas where they would now be able to skirt around. You see, they skirted around the possibility of no firing during the various agreements that we have had. Then they improvised those implements which look like the Stone Age weapons. And they circumvented that process, and yet they caused the casualties to our troops. It's a different matter that we also caused them the equal amount of casualties. But they were able to circumvent that. So this is the this is the trait that they have. Besides not being trusted, even when they trust on words, whatever they speak and whatever is made out to be, how exactly on the ground this will translate itself, and what are the possibilities that they'll be able to skirt around these existing de-escalation clauses to ultimately carry on keeping the gains that they have made now. And not only that much, how would they like to expand these gains in future towards their strategic aims, like what we say, small tactical objectives put together in a sequence in the direction on the ground lead to your operational warfare and operational strategies. And those operational strategies, operational objectives will then lead you on to strategic objectives and finally culmination into grand strategy. That is exactly the point I wish to make right now on this issue.
I think it's a very comprehensive kind of summation. But clearly, if there is one line that comes to mind from the Cold War and the kind of arrangement that obtained between the United States and the former Soviet Union in the last phase, this was said of President Ronald Reagan, that his approach was trust but verify. So I think, taking a leaf from that or extending that, given India's own experience from 1962 to where we are, in the past, it used to be said very often that when it comes to China, that India is not able to comprehend strategic geography in as astute a manner as it ought to. And that India has also chosen not to learn from military history. There are some of the broader observations that have been made about India and its higher strategic and defense management in the past. But now, of course, we have with Prime Minister Modi and his team greater resolve, and we can only hope that a few weeks from now, we would see that India has been able to achieve the objective that it has set for itself. Because in the long run, and I say this very carefully, I think India and China have to arrive at a modus vivendi about how they are going to engage with each other, because they cannot wish geography away. And as is often said, between them, they account for a large cross-section of humanity. And we hope that the Asian century will not be a discordant century. On that note, allow me to thank you, Lieutenant General Rameshwar Roy and Professor Ravi Prasad Narayanan, for being part of this SAM conversation. And we hope to have this conversation with you again in the near future about current developments and where the India-China bilateral relationship is headed. Thank you for being part of SAM Conversations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.